Welcome to the Australian Hiker Podcast, Australia's longest running hiking podcast, downloaded over 1.3 million times worldwide and providing you with an Australian perspective on all things hiking.
Coming to you from Darawal country. In today's episode 351, brought to you by Australian Hiker, we're going to bring you a series of on-trail recordings about the New South Wales-based Coast Track. We hope you'll enjoy. If you'd like to help support Australian Hiker and this podcast, there are a couple of ways that you can help us out. Firstly, by subscribing on your podcast host of choice so that each episode is available as soon as it's published. And if you have the opportunity, leave us a 5-star review. Another way to support us is go to the Australian Hiker website at www.australianhiker.com.au and click on the Support Us page and buy us a coffee. You can do a one-off donation or become a monthly supporter. All donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue producing this podcast and blog. Now let's get on to today's episode. The Coast Track, located in Royal National Park, not far from the centre of Sydney, is a track that Gill and I have been trying to do for probably around about 6 or 7 years. And for one reason or the other, we'd never had a chance to get up there. First up, it was COVID that impacted on what we were doing. Then I drove probably halfway there at one stage and rain was coming in and I ended up with floods with some of the track being blocked off. It was so bad and some of the infrastructure being damaged. So finally, we decided to bite the bullet and head up. Now, in hindsight, possibly not the best time of the year to do it because we did it one day before the shortest day of the year, and we'll talk about that later on in this podcast episode. For us, it was a track that we'd heard so much about, and I've done Kosciuszko's Summit Walk on a number of occasions, and I'd probably say there were more people on this track on the day that we did it than I've ever seen on Kosciuszko itself. So it's a really popular track, and as I said, located not far out from Sydney itself. We ended up loving this track, and when it comes time to updating our top 10 list of favourite hikes, it will make the list. It's a great opportunity close to the centre of Sydney, or in our case, a 3-hour drive from Canberra. It's a long walk if you do the entire walk. And in the upcoming series of recordings that we made on the day, you'll hear what we were thinking and what we were feeling about the track. And at the end of this podcast episode, we'll talk about things that you can do to get the best out of this track itself. Good morning. It's Saturday morning. We're just on our way to Bundeena, which is just south of Sydney, to do the Bundeena to Otford walk, also known as the Coast Walk. This is a approximately 26-kilometre walk along the coastline, taking in well-known tourist sites such as Wedding Cake Rock and the Figure of 8 Pools. I tried to do this walk a number of years ago and drove up from Canberra heading towards Sydney, and the rain was getting heavier and heavier and the winds were picking up. So I decided that, this is not going to be a good time to do a walk in general, but also not a good time to do a walk for a review. So I turned around and headed back, which ended up being the right decision because there was sections of the track that got washed away in heavy rain and low-level floods in some of the areas. So we're around about 20 kilometres away, about 20 minutes away from the trailhead. Jill's going to go through and drop me off and then drive down to Otford, which is the end of the walk, and start making her way north, and while I may make my way south. So I'll end up seeing roughly 3 hours, I'm guessing, into the walk, meeting roughly halfway along, depending on what the walk is like coming north and what the walk's like going south. So looking forward to it. We've lucked it with the weather because the original weather was it was rain yesterday and then rain tomorrow for the next week, but that's now changed, it's improved. So today's a sunny sort of day, some wind gusts, particularly mid to late morning, but not for long, and no rain forecast for today. And just looking now, we're driving through Royal National Park, through a lot of the heavy dense trees, and it's quite clear in the sky, and it looks like it will be quite sunny when I actually get out into the open. Okay, talk to you later. It's 8:05. We're here at the trailhead for what is officially known as the Royal Coast Track in Royal National Park. Just a couple of things with Royal National Park. It is the second oldest national park in the world, and it actually has a feeling of a bit of age about it, just with some of the roads. It feels like an older park just because of the vegetation.
Yeah, it's a really interesting drive in, and you do get that sense of it definitely has been here or been declared as a national park for a very, very long time. Oldest in Australia, I believe.
It is. Now, the trailhead signage is actually quite good, very descriptive. It has an arrow pointing down the track behind a fence or a gate, and it has Otford 27 kilometres. So I must admit, I do love New South Wales national parks. Depending on which bit of information you look at, it varies. So it's somewhere between 26 and 27 kilometres. Weather is really good. It is cool. It is, as I said, 8:06 now, and I was hoping to start at 8 o'clock. So after pretty much a 3-hour drive from Canberra and a loo break in town, we're pretty much starting on time. Jill's got roughly around about a 35-minute drive down to the Otford Lookout, which is the end point for the walk today. So she'll take half an hour to get down there, barring all the many cyclists on the road, which tend to slow the traffic down a bit. Very narrow road, so in a lot of cases there's nowhere for them to pull off. So we did get stuck behind cyclists for a few times. But we'll go through and meet somewhere in the middle. She's certainly a faster walker than I am, so we're estimating we'll probably meet somewhere just north of Gari Beach, but we'll see how we go.
I think it'll be just south of Gari Beach by the time I get there. It is a little bit of a convoluted road, so yes, 35 minutes, but a few hazards along the way, so don't want to speed.
And my first destination, which is not that far away, is Wedding Cake Rock. And this is one of the Instagram images that everyone wants to get, sitting on this rock, even though it is behind fence and supposedly is going to fall into the ocean at some point in the future.
Yes, but you're not going to do that.
No, definitely not. I mean, it looks like it's going to fall into the ocean. So, all right, I will just put my pack on and time to head off. 9:48. I'm just sitting here at the edge of a short beach, having morning tea, having a bit of break and doing this recording. It's interesting, actually. It's a really nice day. When we left Canberra this morning, apart from being dark, it was raining, and the rain continued on for probably about at least half, if not 2/3 of the way up to Sydney. Then it cleared through, which was what the forecast was. But it's a lovely day. It's supposed to be 20 degrees today, so ideal hiking conditions. It's interesting, the beach I've just crossed, coming down the hill, there's a sign saying, no warning, no bikes beyond this point, fines may apply. And I saw 2 guys wheeling their bikes across the beach and then carrying them up onto the pathway heading up the cliff. So it seems to be that the signs tend to be advisory rather than anything else, at least as far as people using this trail. Just sitting here at the end of the beach, there's a very obvious path heading up the cliff. And if you look at it from the other side of the beach, it's really obvious where it is. But I've had a group of 3 guys come and ask me where it was, and it's straight behind me. It's pretty easy to find. And then I just saw another runner who continued running past the trail, heading up the rocks, and then realised he'd gone past it and saw the trail and went up another access point further up. But yeah, I think all of you have to do is just pay a bit of attention, and it does appear to be quite obvious. In crossing the start of the beach, crossed a very inlet inlet, and I think after periods of heavy prolonged rains or driving inland seas, the inlet might actually end up being sort of, at worst, probably knee deep. It was never going to be any deeper than that, and you probably would get wet. I managed to get across fairly dry, except given I've got size 15 feet, managed to dip my left toe in the water, just not paying attention. But lovely day. I have done 4.84 kilometres in an hour and a half, and I'm probably speeding up, if anything. The first hour, I took so many photos. There are so many native plants in flower along the trail. Banksias, correas, philothekas. There's just so much there. and I was just stopping and taking a photo probably every 40 or 50 metres. So now that I've actually got all the species I've seen so far, I'm only stopping and taking photos of flowers when I find something new. Views are good, lovely coastal views, and you can pretty much stop off at a number of places and pick up views from either from the trail, or you can head off just down the rock platform slightly and have a look down there. But yeah, great walk so far. Really happy with it. Talk to you later. It's around about 11:15. I'm at Watermala Falls. I've done about 10 kilometres according to the New South Wales information page. According to my watch, I've done 9.2 kilometres, so roughly about the same sort of distance. And I've got about 2 hours or 6 kilometres to get to Gari Beach, which is where Gill thinks she'll meet me. So we'll see how we go. Excellent walk so far. Really is a lovely walk. I wish I'd done this sooner. But as I said, if doing it in crappy weather, yeah, it wouldn't be so great. But I've just got lovely weather. It's really nice. Watermala Falls, you may be able to hear the falls in the background. They're not particularly big. They're just water running over rocks rather than being a full-on waterfall. And coming down the hill probably about 25 minutes ago, there was they've walled off a section of water that's turned it into almost a swimming pool. So if you feel like going for a bit of a swim in warmer weather, excellent spot to do it. One thing I didn't mention previously was that I went past Wedding Cake Rock, and this is a site that had a reputation for idiocy, I suppose, where people were sitting on the edge of this rock having their photo taken, and the New South Wales geologists have said the rock is going to drop into the ocean any day now. It could be today, could be 100 years from now, but you just don't know. And when you look at it, there's a fairly big crack there, so it wouldn't take a lot to push it, I wouldn't think. So it's fenced off now. There's a $3,000 fine if you're caught over the other side of the fence. And in all honesty, I don't think it's worth the risk, because you're risking your health and safety by doing that. Having said that, you have these expectations about what something's going to look like, and now you're just walking past it. You can get to a point where you can see what the rock looks like, but yeah, it doesn't really do it for me. It's just another rock you walk past. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens when it does eventually go. Still lots of wildflowers. No animals so far. Now, they say you might see echidnas on the track. Birds. I had a lot of birds earlier on. Not so much now. No echidnas, no kangaroos, no wombats. But this is about the bush. It's about the scenery. And it's one of the most attractive walks I've done in a long time. And as far as coastal walks go, it'll be interesting to see what the other half of the walk looks like. It's a lovely looking walk. It really is. So I'm just going to have a toilet break here, I think, because I know they're doing some repair work on some of the facilities. So there are toilets here, but it'll be interesting to see if they're open or not. But there are a couple of other toilets further down the trail, so I'll see what happens from there. Okay, I will keep on going. So we're here at Gari Beach. I've met Gill. Gill had actually arrived probably about an hour and 20 minutes before I got here, but she couldn't check online because she didn't have a signal to see where I was, and she said she didn't want to go up the really steep hill, which I can understand. That hill down to the beach so far today has been the hardest part of the whole walk. And from what Jill's saying, it's similar on the way back towards Otford. So I think the northern section, by the sound of it, is probably the easiest. And when I do these walks, I look at it, the direction I'm travelling and what would be happening if I was travelling the other way. And I think travelling north would be a harder walk. Just by looking at the steps and the slopes, I think coming south, you have an easier task of what you're doing. There really hasn't been so far until even now where I've had any really steep uphill sections, and the coming down from the top of the cliff down to the beach was a very steep downhill section. In fact, it was the steepest of the whole day. From when I moved on from the last time I did a recording, there seems to be a lot of people that aren't doing the entire walk, that are doing sections of it. And this last section from where we are now to where I last did the recording, it was a huge number of people. and I get the impression, because I haven't seen many of them, is they've come out, they're going out to do whale watching and then turning around and going back to that same car park. There wasn't any people that were coming this direction in the last few kilometres of their trip down. One of the things they talk about from around about May through till about August is whale watching, and certainly I saw some whales, and I'll hand over to Gill in a moment. Lots of whales just sitting there, just coming out of the water, turning sideways, turning on their back, flapping their fins, having their tails out of the water. And generally, most of the whales tend to head up north for giving birth. So all the pregnant females will be up north already. This would be the non-pregnant females and the males heading up for breeding, because what tends to happen is the females and the calves are making their way back down, and they tend to sort of hit the New South Wales south coast round about August, September sort of period. So, at some point soon they'll starting to head back down. The landscape changed quite a bit. It went from being, not that it was tall, dense, open forest, but it was tall coastal forest. And when I say tall, it might have only been 5 metres in height, or maybe 6 metres in height. But then it went to a lot of heathland, where a lot of the scrub was probably only a couple of metres in height at most, and the vegetation changed. Lots of flowers, certainly until this section here. There was stuff flowering everywhere, and it did change. So I had eucalypts in the last section which weren't flowering but were developing bud. Gamay lilies, lots of those in flower, wattles, correas, just so much there. I don't think I've seen so much in flower along the coastal section of the coast for a long time. So I'm stuffed. Still got enough for another 11 kilometres go to the car, which is at Otford. But, it looks like it's going to be not as long a section, but certainly it's going to be a bit steeper as far as up and down. What I'll do is I'll hand over to Gill, and she'll talk about her walk from the car park at Otford to here.
Yeah, Tim, I came from Otford Lookout and up to Garry Beach, and it is up and down. The sort of, so heading north, if you like, the south side of the hills are lots of steps, and it winds down on the north side of the hills, but definitely up and down. I'm thinking it's going to be a little bit easier going back, but we'll see. Started out in some quite heavy forest, which was lovely, hugging the coast. Then the palm forests, which were fantastic and huge, really quite impressive to see. And then it opened out into coastal heathland. The views are spectacular. I think I'm going to enjoy the views going south a little bit more. I don't know why that is, but that just tends to be the way. Tim mentioned the whales. I managed to get a video of a couple of whales that were moving along the coastline. They were playing and having a bit of fun, and short video, but we'll post that because I think, everybody loves to see whales at play. So, we're going to head off now and head back to Otford Lookout. It'll take us a few hours. It took me about 2 hours 40 to get to Garry. So, with Tim in tow, I'm not sure. That's probably a little bit of a record, probably little bit longer, given he's had a bit of a longer run as well. So until next time.
It's 3:20 in the afternoon. We've got about 2 hours to go, give or take, about 6 kilometres. So 2 hours is about right. And that'll get us back to Otford Lookout at around about just after 5 o'clock, which is where I thought we'd be. This end of the trail is certainly harder. It's uphill and downhill, whereas the other one, it's had gradual inclines in most cases. So this morning's walk. So walking down through up hills, down through little valleys, down through little communities of huts, very old huts by the look of it, and making our way back towards Otford.
Yeah, so we are at South Era, and as Tim says, the number of huts on this leg of the journey is
Quite prolific, yeah, and they've been here a very long time. No way to drive in, so if you're coming for a holiday, I'm guessing you're just carrying everything. There is a car park at Gary Beach, but that's probably, I think, pretty much the only one along this leg. So vegetation is starting to change. So we've come out of coastal heath, still have a little bit of heath, but starting to get some quite dense but low forest that we're about to walk through. And then a little bit further down, we get the palm forest, which is really impressive. So, yeah, looking forward to that again.
So it's 5:38 p.m. and we've just finished our walk on the coast track. Took a bit longer than we thought, but in all honesty, that was probably my fault to a great extent. I took so many photos, it probably cost me about 45, 50 minutes through the day. But it does say something, the amount of photos I was taking, there's just so much to see. The last part of this walk, and I won't say quite half, because by the time I reached Gari Beach, I'd done about 17 kilometres, and I think Gill had done roughly 10-ish kilometres.
12-ish. Yeah. I'm calling it half. It was a tough half.
Yeah, so Gill got to the Gari Beach and looked at the hill that she would have had to go up and thought, yeah, not going to happen.
I decided I was just going to sit there and maybe hope for some whales to come past, and lo and behold, they did.
So after leaving Gari Beach for lunchtime, we ended up taking probably about 4 hours, whereas Gill took about 2 hours 40 to get there in the morning.
Yeah.
I think it also shows that Gill was probably a bit fresher in the morning.
It was a hard walk back, I have to say. That last leg down into the car park, my legs were jelly.
Yeah, and I was the same. I mean, it was the end of a long day for me as well, so I think we were going a bit slower, and the walk back almost seemed to be uphill almost the entire way.
I know. I kept saying to Tim, it's not uphill all the way.
But it's close. There had to be some downhills, but the downhills weren't that noticeable really, with the exception of probably two of them. But yeah, you just seem to be going up all the time.
And that leg is quite different to the first half. Yeah, it's, when I met up with Tim, he was talking about lots of wildflowers and I'm thinking, did I miss them? It was just completely different vegetation.
And we'll talk more about that when we do the overall walk review in the next section. So, yeah, we got back, and I must admit the last 20 minutes was not quite nighttime, but it was bordering on it without being able to call it night. So a headlamp probably wouldn't have gone astray. So we're taking things slowly. The steps were pretty much laid out and set out. They weren't. It's a very well done track, so it's not as if you have to worry about tree roots. But we just took our time, and we made it to the car at 5:38. Before having a roughly 3 hour, 20-minute drive back home. Yeah. Got back just on 9 o'clock at night. So leaving Canberra at 4:30 in the morning, getting back home again at 9 o'clock at night. So a long day, but as Gill said, she's glad we did this on the Saturday. I was thinking, let's do this on the Sunday. Okay, so in this next section, we're going to talk about the walk as an overall thing and see what recommendations we can make in relation to how to get the best out of this walk. So for me, this is one of the best walks I've done in a number of years. And when it comes time in the coming few weeks to update our top 10 walk list, I think this is going to go into that quite comfortably.
Well, I must admit, on the way up, I did think that we were going to get quite a bit of rain. It was drizzling all the way, almost until, pretty close. And, then the skies opened up and it was clear and it was blue. And I thought, blast, I'm going to have to do this really long, hard walk. No, I didn't think that. I thought that at the end.
And it was forecast as a non-rainy day, and the few days before had been showing as raining, and the week after was supposed to be as raining, and the morning we drove up.
I just didn't believe the weather report, but I should have, yeah.
And the morning we drove up, it looked like some of the rain was clearing, so we couldn't have got a more perfect day.
It was beautiful, yes.
Yeah. So logistics-wise, because we only had one car, and we had offers in the past of people doing a bit of car ferrying for us, but in all honesty, I thought, there was a bit touch and go about whether we could actually get up there or not. I thought, let's just drive up there, and Gill dropped me off at Bundeena for me to walk south, and I started my walk at 8:10 in the morning, and she then drove approximately 30 minutes to the Otford trailhead in the south and started her walk just before 9 o'clock. So she was running about an hour behind me in heading northwards. The logistics-wise, the walk was a bit interesting. I had a look at the New South Wales website on the Coast Walk, or the Coast Track, or the Royal Coast Track, or the Bundeena to Otford Walk.
Yeah, just pick a name.
Pick a name. And for us driving up from Canberra for a day to do this walk was a 3-hour drive. But when I was putting the write-up together of this walk, I discovered that it was only 59 kilometres from the centre of Sydney. So for Sydney-siders, this is very much a doable walk without sort of having to have a really long day in the process. So we got into Bundeena, and we thought, we'll do the right thing. When I know there are supposed to be toilets on the trail, but I didn't know where. And apparently, because of some of the works that were being done, there was an indication that a couple of them were closed. So we stopped in at the sports ground. There were some public toilets there, and made use of the facilities before heading on to the trailhead. Once we actually got to the car park, we discovered there was a toilet 50, 70 metres down from where the trail started. So that's something we weren't aware of, but it's handy to know. The car park itself basically is a dead end. There's a gate that blocks off the road, which is management road for the park services. And there's probably room for about, I'd say, 8 cars, maybe a couple more. And then if you get in there late, you'd have to walk down the road.
Yeah, and I must admit there were quite a few cars parked along the road, and we thought, oh, this is interesting. So, you are in the middle of a suburb, and, some residents, obviously, I'm sure they're going to love the amount of traffic that drives into their dead-end street and parks on the street. So need to be mindful of that. Having said that, there were a couple of vacant spaces that we found at the car park, and we were able to stop there.
Now, the Coast Track is known fairly well for 2 particular things: Wedding Cake Rock, which we'll talk about in a few minutes' time, and the Figure of 8 pools, which I'll talk about later on in this section. So I started walking off and probably got around about, let's say, 100 metres up the track, and there was a turn off to the left to a petroglyph rock art site. That's an engraving rather than painting, but that was a 3-kilometre walk, and I thought, I'm not going to add 3 kilometres to what already is. It's supposed to be a 27-kilometre day. But there are a couple of other walks that are in that area which I'd really be keen to go back and do at some point. And I think if we go back up there again, make a weekend of it and do a couple of 5, 10, 12-kilometre walks.
Easy ones,
yeah. But yeah, it's a lovely area. It really is. And the signage is fairly good on the whole, except for a couple of instances, which I'll mention as we go through, where people were having problems. But the track itself is really well defined. There is a large section of metal mesh on the trail. The steps are sandstone slabs, and they're really well done, and they look like they've probably been fairly new, in all honesty. They're not something that are 30 or 40 years old. They look like they've been done recently. So given the sheer number of people that do this track, either in part or in whole, you can understand why they've spent a bit of money keeping it done up.
Absolutely.
So almost probably as soon as I turned off the main road and heading down towards the coast track proper, I just started taking photos, and I thought, okay, I can only take a photo of one type of plant. I can't take 5 photos of the same thing, because it became so easy. There was just so much in flower and so much to see. I think I took about 280 photos for the day, which even for me is a lot of photos.
I must admit I took a lot too, probably nowhere near that many, but certainly a lot, more than I would normally take.
And that probably did slow me up. It's not an excuse. It's a reason.
Yes, it is.
It's a reason for being there, but it probably would have added about 45 minutes to the day, just the amount of time I spent doing photography. So hit the coastline itself, and again, expansive views. The water was blue, the sea was fairly flattish. There was very little wind. Occasionally, if we had wind, it was just mild breezes, and it was forecast for just some strong gusts in the middle of the day, which didn't eventuate. And just walking along the coastline, it's so easy to see the views from the actual track itself without going off onto the rock platform 20, 30, 40 metres away, except in a couple of instances, which I'll mention later on.
It's a really interesting one because, a lot of walks along the coastline, it is about the views and looking out. But this one, it's got the views, it's got the plants, it's got the kind of, variation of the trail. It's got places further south where it's I guess almost a little bit mystical because the plants are coming right over the top of the trail. So it is quite different, and I think, lots of things for everybody.
One comment I would make here is I was using tracking poles, and I was tossing up what to take with me when I went in the morning, and I thought, no, I'll take my ultralight set of tracking poles. That was a mistake. I should have taken my heavier tracking poles, which I use for around the streets and the town, and they've got rubber stoppers on them because my tracking poles were too small on the tips, and you just would have ended up getting them jammed in the mesh. Mm-hmm. So I probably ended up carrying them just as much as I was using them.
And I made the error of not having any poles.
So, if you're going to take tracking poles, get them with large, chunky rubber tips on them, and that way you'll be able to use them even when you're walking along the metal mesh track. As I said, I estimate it's probably about 50% of the trail.
Yeah, but
mesh.
some of the mesh was that recycled rubber material as well, not necessarily just metal, particularly further south.
Yep. There were a couple of things along the way. First one was Wedding Cake Rock, and I must admit, for me, I won't say it was a disappointment, but I thought, what's all the fuss about? Because for a number of years, people would sit on the rock and on the edge of the cliff and have their photo taken. And it's an iconic photo that people always used to get done. Then New South Wales Park Service put up a fairly robust fence that's probably around about 1.5 metres in height, and people were climbing over the top of that and still getting their photos taken. And now there's a sign up there saying you may be fined up to $3,000 if you're caught on the other side of the fence. And the reason for that is not just being picky. It's, you're sitting on a rock on the edge of the cliff. You've got a risk of falling anyway. But the geologists from the state government have said this rock, the Wedding Cake Rock, will fall into the ocean at some point sooner rather than later. There's a large crack, which means there's not much holding it in place. So at some point, it could be tomorrow, it could be 20 years from now, this large lump of rock is just going to fall into the ocean. So you're putting yourself at risk and other people at risk if you do go over there, and looking at what's below it. You're probably not going to survive having this thing come down on you. There were very few people there, whereas in the past I'd seen huge numbers of people there waiting to have their photos taken. So they look like they've got it under control. It was interesting to look at, but again, didn't do a lot for me. And for us, this, the 27 kilometres is the longest walk that I've done since the Bibbulmun track, and probably Gill's longest walk from around about the same sort of period as well.
No, I wouldn't say that, but it certainly has come close. Haven't done anything like that in the last couple of years.
And in my case, I certainly, this was only with a day pack, not with a full weighted pack, but as I lead into the Heiston Trail in around about 4 weeks' time, it's a good chance to do some training. From there, pressed on again, and there really along the coastline, there were some really nice areas. There were some good views. I came into one area along the coast there was a large picnic area, one of the biggest set of toilets I've seen in a national park for a long time, and quite flash toilets as well. There was a pool that had been created at some point before that, and if it had been summer, it was almost an invitation to sort of spend 10 or 15 minutes there just sitting in this pool, and it was quite a nice little area. So that area I was talking about is Watamolla, which is also known as Place by Running Water. And again, this was a spectacular area for picnics, great toilet, good parking facilities. but this was probably the area where a lot of day walkers kicked off from. Now, the reason for that is probably one of the best spots for whale watching, and you can certainly look for whales along the cliff lines further up. But for me, this is where I, and then later on Gill, saw them in this southern section. And I was walking out towards the point, probably 300 metres, and all of a sudden there's just people everywhere at every vantage point. And I'm trying to think, yeah, it's lovely, but what are they looking for? And I realised it was the whales that they were looking for. And there were just so many people. There probably would have been, I'm estimating, 100 people within a 1 to 2 kilometre section. Now, for most of those, they were probably just going up to the main cliff line, turning around and coming back. But I know there were some people that had gone probably 3 or 4 or 5 kilometres, and then they turned back from there with very few going on. So when I came out onto the main cliff line, I could actually see whales, and I tried to get photos of them, but they were probably a bit too far. They were close enough to see that they were whales, and they were flapping their fins and coming out of the water, not full breaching, but they were arching out of the water. But I just couldn't get a decent photo. Really, from that descent down to Gari Beach to the end of the track, it's very much almost like call it the halfway point as far as the vegetation. The northern half of the trail is heathland, open cliff lines. The southern half of the trail is just a series of rolling hills bordering on being rolling mountains where you're going up and down and you're spending a lot of time in denser forest. So you're not getting the expansive views. You're not there for whale watching. You're there probably to look at the huts that have been there for quite a few years.
Yeah, and they are amazing. Like these little cabins, that definitely have been there a long time. Little communities, very, very self-sufficient. And yeah, just that surprised me. And each bay had a series of these little huts that, people obviously spend time on weekends and holidays and so on, and didn't see too many people at them, though when you did, you could have a little bit of a chat and work out. The other thing I think that was interesting from there on was there were a lot of surfers, and certainly Gari has got a car park, and there was a bit of a surfing competition that was going on when I was there, and it had finished by the time Tim arrived.
So the last section of the walk through palm forests, and again, if you look at the video, a slideshow of this, it looks like it's dark, but then you sort of look upwards and you can see blue sky through the palms.
It's very dense.
It was just dense, and that was quite interesting. And then sort of progressively making our way up and up and up.
And up and up and up and up.
And Jill said, no, we don't go to the top of the cliff or top of the hills, and we did.
Sorry.
It was just the final ascent was just a steady up and up and up, more stairs and up again. So,
well, I started to count the stairs in blocks of 16 or 20. I don't know why I picked on 16 or 20 and then started to count again. And I reckon on one particular set of steps, I must have got to 120, 140 steps and just gave up counting. It just went on forever.
So we eventually did get up to the top of the ridgeline, made our way around and started coming down. And by that stage, it was starting to get fairly dark. Now, it wasn't nighttime, but it was getting dark enough. And on the final probably 400 metres, it wasn't pitch black.
That was a long 400 metres.
Yeah, it was getting close. And the good thing about this trail is because it is so well maintained, there's not rocks in the middle of the trail, there's not tree roots in the middle of the trail. So we were just taking, it was enough light to be able to see where you were putting your feet and just taking things slowly.
And also, once you get your eyesight adjusted, sometimes I think it's easier to see in the dark without a lamp than it is with a lamp if you can get your eyes adjusted.
Yeah, one comment I would make here was we did this the day before the shortest day of the year.
Yeah, that's right. That's the other thing I was thinking, let's pick our timing. So I was expecting rain and the shortest day and, so it didn't turn out that bad. But, it was definitely a good experience and, the vegetation changes so much on that last part of the walk
makes it just another interesting aspect. Still, you've got the water views and the cliff tops and all of those sorts of things, but going in and out of the palm forests and starting to get into the Banksia forests and so on was just beautiful.
What I was going to say is, if you want whales, that's really between around about May to August, so wintertime. And if you are going to do the entire walk, I would suggest that you take a headlamp with you, or else travel up the day before and start walking, I'd say probably 7 o'clock, just to give you that bit of extra flexibility. There's nothing wrong with doing this walk in the middle of summertime.
Or take less photos, Tim. Move faster.
You could certainly do this walk in the middle of summertime, but you've then got the heat in a lot of exposed areas. And I think you'd probably find the number of people would probably double or triple.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was one of the busiest trails I have seen. And I'd almost say it was busier than the Kosciuszko Summit Walk.
Yeah, yeah. And I have to say that I think the temperature was supposed to be about 20 degrees-ish. The sun was out and it was hot. We were sweating, by the time we got back to the car, we were just dripping. And even though it was cooler and later in the day. So, yeah, it'd be pretty scorching on those cliff tops in summer.
Yeah. One thing I hadn't mentioned was the second feature of this trail that people tend to want to look at is the figure-of-8 pool. Now, when you look at it from the top, it looks like an 8. It's on the rock platform. By the time we got there later in the afternoon, the tide was high tide. The wind, while it wasn't strong, was starting to push the water over the rock platform, so we didn't opt to go down there. And this is always a risk. If you do this walk only to do the figure-of-8 trail, there's a risk that you won't do it. You want to pick really good weather and ideally at a low tide to get there.
Yeah.
And there are some car parks that are closer to that. So if you don't want to do the entire walk, or you want to start from Otford and do the walk and come back again, you've got a walk that's probably 10 or 11 kilometres, not the full. In fact, even less than that.
Yeah.
You might be sort of 8 to 10 kilometres. So pick your time of the year, pick the weather conditions, and try and pick a low tide to get the best out of it.
Yeah.
But and in all honesty, we didn't do this walk for Wedding Cake Rock and the figure-of-8 pool. It was a spectacular walk, as I said, and it's one that I'm glad that I did. And I'd be keen to go back there at some point again and do even just the northern part of the trail. If you've only got time to do a certain part of the trail, do the northern section from Bundina, turn around and go back again, because that is spectacular. There's no doubt about it.
It's an interesting one because certainly on the southern leg, not a lot of benches to sit. There are a few, but not really that many. And also toilet facilities, almost non-existent. There are a couple, but it's a very, very long time between the toilet blocks. There isn't one at the Otford Lookout, and then there's kind of ones in a camping area if you can get across the swamp. I couldn't, so I ended up having to go to Gary, which has got a car park and a pretty comprehensive toilet block there.
And they were saying, apparently there's 4 toilets in total. They were saying 2 of them were out of action because work's being done on them. So, obviously this is the quiet time of the year, but there was a huge number of people there for the quiet time of the year.
Yeah. And all the cabins have got, their own little outhouse, but they're locked. So, they obviously belong to someone, respect that, and, you're just going to have to hold on and keep going.
We hope you've enjoyed this podcast on the Coast Track in Royal National Park, just south of Sydney. Excellent walk. Can't recommend it highly enough. So, if you get a chance, get up and do it. That's all for me. Bye for now.
And bye from me.